Good evening, everyone. Tonight or this evening, I would like to bring you a conversation about artificial intelligence. And I really want to start by asking you, our listening audience, a couple of questions. So, if you are in the listening audience and you're a health professional, how do you feel about artificial intelligence, AI? Some people also call it augmented intelligence. Is it helping you with your patients and your patient outcomes? And so, for others in the audience that are non health professionals, are you using Chat GPT or some other vehicle to get your information? And just something for you to think about. And for both of you out in the audience, do you know that you can trust the information that you're getting? Or is this going to be another, I won't say the name of one of those vehicles that everybody loves to listen to? So, how do you fact check? That's going to be an important question. So, this afternoon, I am Dr. Doris Brown, the acting deputy president for the Cobb Institute. And I have two guests with me this evening. Um, they are both fantastic health professionals, and they have a keen interest in the questions that I presented to you, as well as many things about artificial intelligence. And so we are going to speak to you about artificial intelligence at the upcoming Cobb Institute Symposium that is going to be held at the National Medical Association Convention in Chicago next month. And I want to introduce the two guests that I have with you. Or really, I'm going to ask them to give some key points about themselves, and then we'll come back and have a conversation. Let's start with you first, Dr. Ronnie Sebro, and then following you will be Dr. Brenda Jamerson. Dr. Sebro.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown, and thank you for having me. I'm really honored, and this is a great experience. So I'm Ronnie Sebro. I'm a tenured professor of epidemiology, imaging physics, and radiology at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. I'm the vice president of research at the Cobb Institute. I also serve as the deputy editor for radiology artificial intelligence, the associate editor for the Journal of Imaging Informatics in Medicine. Most of my research centers around using artificial intelligence in radiology, so for diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment decisions. And as you know, in healthcare, 75% of the AI that's used is actually used in radiology. And I see this as a transformative time where AI is going to really revolutionize how we work and practice as clinicians.
Thank you. Dr. Jameson.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about AI and research in healthcare. My name is Brenda Jamerson, and I'm a PharmD, which is a doctor of pharmacy. I did my postdoctoral training at UNC, and my background is in drug development science. That's what I did my training in. So I'm the founder and CEO of iSimca Health, and we are the creators and developers of ResearchLink, which we'll talk about more today, as well as Science My Health. And those are both AI-powered applications that we hope to have great feedback on in the coming months to years, sorry. So we're NIH's SBR-funded health research company, and we're located in Research Triangle Park. My background is as I mentioned, drug development scientist, where I was a director of medical affairs and did a number of healthcare clinical trials during my time in pharmaceutical industry. And so then I went to the academics field where I pursued doing health research and clinical research and training young scholars in that area. So with that, thanks a lot, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much. And I failed to say that I'm a medical oncologist by training and have been a longstanding member of the National Medical Association working in the area of clinical trials as well as oncology clinical trials. And we know that as we move towards precision medicine or targeted therapies, we use a lot of AI tools. And so, as we explore this AI in healthcare, let's take a deeper dive into that subject and look at some of the issues and concerns that we have. And so, I think this is extremely timely because of the upcoming symposium that I mentioned that we're going to have at the National Medical Association, where we will get into a really deep dive and look at some of the comprehensive issues that are surrounding AI. And it's moving really very fast in terms of the development. And I certainly don't want the members and those that are attending the convention to be left out. We want to know about this. We want to explore the issues that are around it as it's changing healthcare as we know it today. So if you are attending the National Medical Association, do show up on Sunday and participate in this informative session. It's a symposium, and I know Dr. Sebro is going to give us some opening remarks at that session. And so let's come to you first, Dr. Sebro, as you're thinking about your opening comments at the symposium and sharing sort of the overview of the state of AI in healthcare. Could you talk about some of the aspects of AI that you consider most important for our listening audience and for healthcare providers?
Sure, sure. I'm definitely happy to do that. So I think before we start, I think we should discuss what is artificial intelligence and how do we refer to it and what should people be thinking about when we say artificial intelligence. And quite simply, artificial intelligence is sort of the development of a computer system or algorithm that can perform a task that is one typically done by a human requiring human intelligence. So we expect the computer to do things like learning, reasoning, problem solving, and decision making. So artificial intelligence is actually a field that sort of comes out of two subfields, which I would say statistics. So my PhD is in statistics, and also computer science, electrical engineering. Those fields came together to make artificial intelligence. And it also involves things like data science. And when we say artificial intelligence, we're really talking about a whole big superset of things, including traditional statistics, machine learning, and of course, deep learning. And deep learning is something that really requires computational programs that are built on architectures using convolutional neural networks. So these convolutional neural networks existed back in the 50s and 60s. However, we couldn't use them because we didn't have computational power. But thanks to our friends who like to play video games, and my son is playing video games right now, they've developed these GPUs, graphical processing units, that enable us to do fast computational calculations, and now we can do these deep learning type studies. But in terms of what are the most important aspects of AI that we should be talking about, I think we really have to talk about bias and bias mitigation in AI algorithms. So what happens is when you're creating an AI algorithm, you actually need generally 3 to 4 data sets. You need to have a training data set, validation data set, an internal testing data set, and an external validation data set. If you train your data on biased data, so like data that's not representative of diverse communities, or data that actually shows systemic inequalities, you end up training a model to perpetuate these systemic inequalities. So this is something that we really need to focus on. So that's the first thing I want to mention. The second thing, and I think Dr. Jameson's going to touch on this, is AI for precision medicine and drug dosing. So we can use AI to do a much better job of drug dosing, leveraging precision, these physiological and pharmacological metrics, kidney function. I think that's where AI is going to really have that real, you know, soupçon of excellence. And I think Dr. Jameson will definitely hit on that. I think we need to talk about access. AI is going to be a great tool to lever. And what we're worried about now is that the AI-driven technologies, they're going to cost a lot of money, and they're only going to be accessible to communities that have good financial resources. So it's really important that these models are accessible to underserved communities. I think we don't talk about the ethics of AI development and policy. I think it's really important that we're at the table when we're shaping AI policies. We need to talk about patient privacy, informed consent, and make sure we have community involvement in the development of AI. And that's primarily because a lot of underserved communities have tremendous mistrust in medical research. So we really need to be at the table there. And finally, we need to talk about our own community in terms of how are we getting prepared for doing AI? What's our education and workforce preparedness? So I think our members need to be, we're talking about the undergraduate level, we're talking about the medical education level, we're also talking about postgraduate training should also include, you know, workshops on AI, understanding AI's capabilities and limitations, to understand how to critically read a paper and assess tools. And I think those are the things that the NMA members, the Cobb Institute members can focus on to reduce disparities and to help patient outcomes and advocate for equitable healthcare innovation in the future.
Thank you. And if you are a developer of a tool, um, such as the generative AI that you see in chat box, where you're using the text, but if you move into more tools where you're going to use it to harness some of your patient data and giving feedback from that, is there some mechanism or some policy, and you mentioned policy, that's going to have some protections built in so that, one, we have privacy. You can transfer it, and we know we have telemedicine and telehealth where we're sending data across technological tools from one place to the other. What are the protections that you have in there? And is there a general policy from state to state that you might know about?
All right, so Dr. Brown, excellent question. And that question has to be answered differently depending on where you are in the world. So in Europe, the EMA, that's the FDA equivalent in Europe. They've been very aggressive about making sure there's patient protections, consent, understanding. So the Europeans have a very strong handle on making sure that the data sets are transparent, that they're diverse, and that there is some sort of feedback mechanism to make sure that the model is doing what it's exactly supposed to do. The FDA is a little bit, they have been steadily increasing the number of approved algorithms, number of software. So I think we're up to, we're well into the thousands now of approved different things for AI. And I think the FDA is a little bit different, and it sort of is coming down to what each company is trying to do. Some companies have what's called, even in clinical trials, you have stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. The stage 4 is where you're actually checking when it's out in practice, how it's performing. So I think some companies do have that, but some companies are, here's the model, and that's the model there. I think most people actually prefer a model that you actually have to update continuously, because that way they actually are harnessing your intellectual property to build a better model. So they're updating their model continuously. So that's what happens.
Okay, thank you. And there are some other issues that you mentioned, like access and quality, that we'll come back to later on. Let's have Dr. Jameson give us some information, because I know you are harnessing AI in a fascinating way, with the potential to overall improve patient health, our people health, if you will, and giving them access to clinical trials, which is an area that's near and dear to me. So, can you share an overview of your approach to AI?
Oh, absolutely. And so I just wanted to also tag on to the last question on, AI and how it's getting used. One term that our audience might hear a lot about is what's called large language models. And so if you're using ChatGPT, which now has several different versions or models of that, you're using a large language model that's been trained. And so what we're doing, in addition to training these just general models, is that you can also fine tune it with more medical information, so they become very, very fine tuned and precise to the use case you want. And what I'm excited about, and what we'll talk about with what our company, iSimca Health, is doing, is that we're taking AI and using it for the use case of saying, now, how can we, what might have only been known to a few people in terms of medical information and medical research, and now bring that out to everyone. So it's now out in the light of day that, we can now, in our various communities, have access to the same information that people that would have been in the ivy towers, so to speak, would have only had that information years ago. So one use case or way that we're getting the information out is that our company was initially spun out of what we were doing in our academic research, with using ways that we can put medical research into plain language, mainly for informed consents. When you're trying to get involved in a clinical trial, you have to read all that medical research jargon. We were trying to make sure that it was, in a way people can understand. And so when we did our focus groups, we found, though, that's a big issue. It's like, if you can't understand the information, you don't trust the information, and or how do you get the information in the first place? A lot of our community folks here in Durham, North Carolina, were telling us, well, no one's even told me about a clinical trial. So what we did is that we've taken all of the thousands of research studies that are out there and available for people to find, and we've put it all into plain language that you can find it on our platform called Research Link, and that's with a Q for question. And so you can go through, you can search for it, you can find the investigators that are doing those studies. You can save those studies and come back later. And we're working on other technology that's going to allow people to even have conversations about the study, because we find that, reading, well, that's okay, even if it's in plain language and it's not in college language, is one thing. But to be able to ask about the study, like, can I qualify for this study? Or I have diabetes. Does that make me not be eligible for this study? That's important, so people can get closer and closer to actually wanting to be in the study. And the main thing I think our audience needs to know is that over time, a lot of Black and Brown people have been underrepresented in clinical trials, for various reasons. We find underrepresentation because of that access issue I mentioned. So, we're giving this platform, that you can go on for free and find all these studies that you want. And then also older adults and people in rural areas and people that are women and should have been in cardiovascular studies, but they weren't. And so for all those reasons, getting all this information that we have AI help us generate and put in the hands of people, into the hands of people now, we're hoping is going to be a game changer for fixing this underrepresentation problem. So that's one way we're using AI with Research Link, and some of the other ways that we're looking to transform the way this clinical trial information is available.
Thank you. It's particularly interesting because of our lack of trust. And so you have the ability to delve deeply into the data that's there and ask the questions. And when you're able to have that two-way conversation, I think you feel more comfortable, you trust who you're talking to, and the information is more usable. And hopefully we will have more Black and Brown people signing up for those clinical trials. So now,
Dr. Brown, one point that you were making about trust in people, I just also want to say, like, this, what people should know is AI, we should see that as a helper, that we don't want to replace the research investigator's job to explain the study, or that, so we're seeing this as a way that you can take that 30-minute, hopefully, conversation you have about the study at the office, and now those people that don't have a lot of time can be assisted. So AI, I think, I just wanted to put that little pin out there, could be a way to assist our research professionals and medical doctors in sort of helping deliver this information.
Yes, thank you. So let's I have a question for both of you as we talk about the deep concerns and the issues that are surrounding AI in healthcare. Some of the commentators have talked about voicing their concern about bias and misinformation. And I think Dr. Sebro was alluding to, if you have garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. and the biases that people build in based upon whether it's conscious or unconscious in your developing these tools is something that we really have to deal with, because coming out of COVID, we know about the misinformation and the disinformation and how people did not want to take a vaccine, et cetera. And we may be coming back to that point in our healthcare series. So can you tell me, how do we feel trust with the new AI tools that are coming out, and how can we somehow help to build in the tools that have less bias in the algorithm so that it will help the individual that's wanting to use it and the healthcare provider to help them to come to the best decisions about their healthcare? Both of you, who wants to start first? Dr. Jameson, how about you?
Okay, sure. Okay, thank you so much. So, what came to mind around bias is a lot of our audience might have also heard about these large language models, what we call hallucinating, meaning like it would just make it up because it sounds good. And so, over time, what we've done is we want people to be aware of, AI is that, it's something that we need to look at. And then if we don't understand it or we think that it's out there on a limb, make sure we have those conversations. But the technology is getting better. What we build in and what people are building in that have, these enterprise systems is a way to check for these hallucinations and this bias so that it doesn't sort of tell these off stories. And then I think Dr. Sebro mentioned when he was mentioning AI and its limitations is that the AI is only as good as what it's been trained on. So if it's been trained on a data set that doesn't include the diversity of individuals that have been input into it, that's what it's gonna bring out. So in the next 5 to 10 years, as we get more of our information in there, more people that are Black and brown and have different diseases with different prevalences that are not represented in other populations, then we'll know more. And those biases should be going down, but we have to recognize they're still there.
Yes. Dr.
Excellent.
Sebro.
No, no, I completely agree. I think everything you said is absolutely correct. I think when it comes to bias, it's tough to assess. So there's bias that is known and there's bias that is unknown. And we can only really go at the bias that is known, but it's hard to really figure out, are we still being biased? So that's one challenge we have right now. And it depends on, as I said, the training data sets you have. So people love their large language models, Claude, Monet, Gemini, Perplexity, Grok 3, pick your poison, right? There are lots of them out there. But they do have a tendency to hallucinate. And I think part of that is they're really putting together strings of tokens to try to make what we consider sense. And it really depends on what you're training that data set on. At some point in time, you could have searched for, is MMR associated with autism? And you'd find the wrong answer from time to time. So I think these are tools that should be used as adjuncts, but they should never be used in place of someone who has actual real medical knowledge. And then one of the things to talk about bias is we don't talk about, when we're developing these models, about the researchers and the research team who's creating the models. I think if the team is there that is appropriately diverse and asking the right questions, we're less likely to fall into the trap of developing or using, first of all, a biased data set and developing a biased model. So I think that team needs to really be ethically grounded and understand some of the nuances and really communicate with the community what they're trying to do.
Yes. I was just reading an article, and it was talking about how to assess AI for vulnerabilities. And so this article was just published this month in the Annals of Internal Medicine. And it was called, let's see if I, Assessing the System Instruction Vulnerabilities in the Large Language Models. And so what they did was to do an exploratory analysis of five of the algorithms that's there, the Googles and Gemini and the Metas, Llamas, etc. And in those five tools, they explore the feasibility of customizing the generative transformers in all of those. And unfortunately, 88, they asked several questions. And so 8 out of the 100 health inquiries that they asked each one of those customized large language model chat boxes, 88% of the responses were health disinformation, unfortunately. Four of the five, um, and that included all of them except for the Claude, um, they reported 20 of the 20, so 100% of their responses in there showed some form of disinformation. And the last one showed about 40% of the disinformation. The kinds of things that they ask it in terms of disinformation, we go back to the vaccines and autism and that link, whether HIV was airborne, this diets for cancer cure, the risk for sunscreen, some of the genetically modified organisms. There was some conspiracies that was related to that, and that garlic can replace antibiotics, and 5G causes infertility, and that there's a lot of myths also around attention deficit disorders and depression. So, again, if you build in something, as you've indicated, with and again, not knowing exactly how these questions were formed, but going back and looking at that article, and again, I don't know who the principals were and who they were asking those questions with, but at least they put those questions in with biases, knowing that you're looking at the vulnerabilities and you're getting almost 100% disinformation. So where would a person go to fact check this kind of information?
This is a great question. I'm going to start off. Is that okay?
Yes,
I
please.
think the fact checking should come from talking to your primary care doctor or your medical profession. That's where it really ends. But what has happened is the internet, which was developed way back when, it sort of became open in like in the 70s, 80s, and through 90s, people started using the internet. That has been a real treasure trove of understanding information and information transfer. And when Google came on board in 2000 through 2003, really crazy. Everyone started to get access, and we could Google terms. Until Google is a verb now. You can Google something, Google it. And what Google did was try to figure out all the pages that said something and sort of rank the pages in terms of which page was most commonly cited. So what's happened though is post 2010, we've figured out how to automatically generate web pages. So more and more of the internet and more of like the Reddit or more and more of the things that you're interfacing with, they're computer generated. And to some extent, they're generated in the seeking of views or clicks or watching something, and not so much for veracity, not for truth. So that's part of the problem. So we are generating a lot of extra data that's not really true data. And obviously, around the controversial topics like, garlic as an antibiotic or 5G and infertility, if I'm sort of one of those people who thinks that must be something, I'll make a web page about it or what have you. Then someone will make a web page about it, and those things amplify over time. So what has happened is that we have a term for this in computer science. We call it enshittification of the data, where the data is not as pure as it used to be. So ChatGPT, I think they stopped using data from the internet from up to I think 2022. I don't know if they've changed that more recently, but they were trying to use older data, which was more likely to be human generated and more likely to be accurate than the newer data, which is more likely to be synthetic, created for views, clicks, ad revenue, or what have you. And that's part of the problem that we're having with these LLMs.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, everything Dr. Sebro said, I've seen 100% agree. The one thing that I think needs to be differentiated in terms of our definitions of AI is that what sometimes a lot of these fallacies occur around what's called generative AI, because to the point Dr. Sebro just made, you go out to whatever source the large language model had access to when it was trained, and that's what it's going to tell you. However, if you're using generative AI, that you're always going to have that risk, and until those models kind of start to weed out all of that information. The other aspect, the AI that we're using in ResearchLink, is based on a database. It's a confined database. We're not asking the AI to go query Google. We're using the database that we have and then using AI to do our medical translations from, which is the corpus of all the clinical trials and the inclusion, exclusion, and the protocols and informed consents that we have available for it to query. So that's a very, very important distinction. Is it the generative AI, or is it a finite data source AI based model? Because you're going to get one that's going to can go off on the rails, and the other that's only constrained to what it can do. And of course, you'll get limited answers because it's not going to go outside of that. But the generative AI can do its thing, as we'll say.
Okay. So if you just everyday people, maybe not necessarily in the health arena, um, and they're using AI, asking, many people, oh, I need to go see a doctor, so I want to look up what I think I have or what they may have said. And how do you think that's working out when they go to the various searches? Usually it's Google. Um, I tell people, you want to go down the rabbit hole, so you heard something, and now we must look it up and find out whether it's valid. And there we go. So, how do you think those everyday people are using AI to their best advantage now? Who wants to start?
Well, I'll start this time. I mean, I think that people are finding it maybe sort of almost by accident. I find some people do Google searches, and then all of a sudden, oh, then the AI said this. And so they find it's a lot more robust in terms of how much information they've received. So I think people are using it in the way you just mentioned, Dr. Brown, just in every day, like the symptom finder, and like I have this, and should I be worried, and just those everyday kinds of pieces of information they want to find out about. What has been done, and maybe what should be more transparent, I guess, in a way that people can get to the best AI models, is that not all AI models are created equally. There's several large language models that are available to the public, whether it be Gemini or ChatGPT, or go down the list of these that we even use in research. And it may give you slightly different answers, but I'm finding, to my surprise and actually delight, that these are actually getting better at rapid pace in terms of answering some of these very, very consumer friendly questions.
Thank you. That's good. Dr. Sebro, would you like to add to that?
Excellent. No, I remember this. So as a radiologist, I had to do a year of internal medicine, and ever so often you have a patient show up with a stack of papers that they printed out from the internet, and you're like, great, this is going to be interesting, half an hour. But which was fun, right? Because you got to sit with the patient and tell them why you were making your inference, how you were making your inference. But I see more and more patients actually going to ChatGPT, to Google, trying to figure out what's wrong with them. And I think that has its pluses and minuses. I think it's tough because the way humans interact with machines, we haven't really figured it out yet. Some humans, in particular the younger generation, I want to say younger, not to date myself, like less than, like, I would say 40 years of age, they have tremendous trust in machines. So if the computer says something, or you have a viral infection, don't worry about it, it's not strep throat. They will take that to heart. Whereas the older population, I don't know if that's because the older population didn't grow up with machines and computers, a little bit less trustful. So they still will actually go on to reference with their clinician. And I think that is something that we have to talk about too, in terms of if the machine is wrong, if ChatGPT is wrong, what happens there, and what the liability looks like for that person and their outcomes, and what could possibly go wrong there. That's something we need to talk about. But I think really, if you have any sort of medical problem, you should try to reach out to your clinician and talk to your clinician. And if you have some sort of search, fine, you can show it to them. And most clinicians are really happy to discuss what, and they encourage you, as long as you're not too much of a hypochondriac, they will be reasonable and work with you. So I think it's really something to be used in conjunction with, but not in place of.
Yes. Well, when we talk about AI, and I guess we really didn't cover some of the basic things like different types of AI. And as we are moving towards the convention and the symposium that I'll get back to in a moment, let's just talk about what are the different types of AI to give our listening audience a sense of what they should call it. We heard the word generative, and there are other types. So let's discuss
Sure, sure. I'll just start throwing things off the top of my head here. So you have very simple models, which will come from like things like decision trees. So if yes, so for example, if someone has a hemoglobin of like, I don't know, less than, could be wrong about this, like somewhere around 11, anemic. If not, not anemic, right? Depending on sex or what have you. So that's one example of artificial intelligence. And you get into more sophisticated models, the way you have things like uh, Bayesian net models. You have things like support vector machines, random forest classifiers, ridge regression, uh, KNN clustering, k-means clustering, different things like that. Those fall more on the machine learning type processes. And then you move into what I consider deep learning. And deep learning is where we have the black box, where we put the data in and we get an output and we're like, it looks like it's working, it's getting the right answer, but I'm not sure exactly how. And so those will form into things like you have the GANs, so the generative adversarial networks, you have the LLMs, you have just regular CNNs, RNNs, um, transformers, lots of different transformers are in there. Um the BERT models, these all fall into that framework of deep learning where we're like, I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but it's black boxish. I'm tried it on two or three different data sets and I'm getting a reliable result. So I think this is doing what I think it should be doing.
Okay. Uh, One other one, as an oncologist, and of course, my patients would want to know, can we predict based on certain risk factors? So, Dr. Seabrook, can you talk a little bit about the predictive AIs and tools that we would use in that sense when you look
Sure.
at a patient's record? That's another area that
Yeah,
cancer patients are very concerned about.
excellent.
Does
Very
this,
interesting
can you
question.
predict? And those are tools that are now coming up where we take a small blood sample and look at various changes, and this can predict X, Y, and Z in terms of
Correct.
your
Correct.
ability to have recurrent cancer or to actually have that cancer.
So it's a huge, huge line of work that started sort of, I guess, in statistics where we try to predict risk and predict the risk of recurrence. So that was huge. You have like the Gale model and Claus model for breast cancer. Like, what are my risk factors and how do I change my clinical behaviors or my clinical prescription patterns as a doctor, or how do I, as a patient, how's my risk? How frequently should I be screened or surveilled for cancer? I think what has happened is that the electric medical record is very dense. There's a lot of data there, and we've picked out as humans what we thought was very important, like age of menarche and age of first child, and whether you breastfed or not, things like that. We've sort of thought, oh, these may be important, and we built simple statistical models based on those, because those are simple, right? Where you have maybe 10 or 20 variables, you can build 10 or 20 models to sort of do prediction. But what happens is, as you have more and more variables, because you have a much richer data set now, it's harder to do what we call multiple comparisons corrections. So you may have 10 or 15,000 variables that are available on a patient, right? Because you have serial measurements on like CBCs or hematocrits or CA99 or CEA or something like that, right? and you have all these serial measurements or estrogen levels, for example, and you can put those into a model, but traditional statistics will not work because you have so many comparisons and so many pair-wise and three-ways-wise and four-ways-wise comparisons you can do. It becomes a nightmare. So this is where AI really comes in to be really helpful and really important, because AI can then summarize of all these, say, 15,000 variables you've provided me with, here are probably the top 10 that actually can work to predict quite reasonably well. And so we have this procedure called cross validation where we'll sort of segment the data set into multiple partitions, and we will do validation. We'll keep trying. Oh, what about this partition? How does the model perform? Let's change. Let's see, and we'll do some hyper tuning of the parameters to figure out what's the optimal parameter to make sure the model is robust and reliable over different data sets. And I think that's the future. So when we have these models now, we go into prediction, and prediction is very, very tough because no two people are the same. So even the traditional, like say a random survival forest model, even that when we look at like Bayer scores and C scores, C indexes, those are limited. And we get studies that are maybe about an AUC, which is an area under the curve of probably about, you know, zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.8. And that's usually good for research, but it's not quite there. The future is what we're looking at is doing something called digital twins. And we'll talk about that more in detail in the symposium, but I think that is going to be the future to really get really high level, person level prediction data.
Thank you. Certainly, as we move towards convention, the depth that we will be going into in that program, and I know I was supposed to tell people all about it. There's so many speakers that's on that Sunday that I think it's going to be very informative. But I hope that the listening audience tonight have picked up some clues of things that they want to see and learn more about AI. And I know if we had a general audience and had them raise their hand, how many of you use AI? Probably the large majority will say, nope, I don't do that. But I think if you look at and ask a few more questions about some of the drivers in terms of changing your habits in a doctor's office. So, you know, note taking, where they summarize things, those are AI tools that a person may not have thought about as some of them. Are there other things like that that's for everyday practitioners? It may be making it a little easier or more efficient to get their work done on a day to day in responding to patients, but not leaving the patient out and getting their face on that computer and keeping it there, taking away from the interaction of the patient. So, are there other tools that is also making life a little bit more efficient for healthcare providers? That's really AI that they don't think about. Any comments on that? Note taking?
Sure, sure. I'll start again. I'm sorry. So for clinicians, one of the big problems is of course scheduling. So you have scheduling on both sides, patient scheduling, and you also have clinician scheduling where people were trying to get vacation and time off and conference time. So artificial intelligence is getting into that uh, scheme and trying to figure out, oh, we have breast cancer screening. Some patients don't show up. What's the no-show rate? Should we overbook those days to have like a completely filled clinic so we have maximum utilization of resources? So that's something we do already. For radiology, we're doing almost everything. So a lot of computer vision and radiology just lends itself to AI because it's pretty much pattern recognition, you know. And I hate to say it, it's like when you're teaching your 3, 4, 5 year old cat, dog, mouse, chicken, very similar. And so we're doing a lot of like pneumothoraces, we're doing, you know, cardiomegaly, pneumonia, we're doing strokes, we're doing pulmonary embolism, fractures, lots of different things that we're doing in radiology already.
Yes. Dr. Jameson, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, one thing that's exciting with regards to medications is AI can actually do a job of helping better to understand adverse events and predictive kind of analysis of adverse events, um, and those would be side effects from medications. So there's some information coming out there that can help us make sure that we get the right drug to the patient that could best respond and avoid the AEs from the medications. And then the other thing that came to mind that in my volunteer work with a community health group here in my local area, that we have tried to help people understand when you finally do get to your provider, being ready to say, okay, here's my condition, here's my medications, here are my top 5 questions that I'd like to ask you. Because a lot of people describe that I don't think or I can't think of what I should say. Well, I think that's one way that we've suggested to people. You can use AI, tell me top 5 or 10 questions I should be on the lookout for that I can ask my provider during my next visit. So it kind of practically helps them think about their own conditions and then generate some questions that they wish they would have asked when they leave, but now they have them right in front of them.
That's really important. Yes, make that list before you go in to find out. But also an area that, as we're talking, the drug interaction. Many times, because patients don't just go to one doctor, they may get pill X, Y, and Z from this doctor, but they don't tell the next provider that I'm also taking whatever. And then when they have an adverse event, it may be because they're on some drugs that are having an interaction. And if their primary care provider is keeping a record of what that person is on and they share that information, it will tell them in an AI kind of format what interactions that may be resulting in them having adverse events. So I want to just, in closing, because our time is getting a little short, to talk about the W. Montague Cobb Symposium that is named after W. Montague Cobb, and some people don't even know who Dr. Cobb was, but he was truly a groundbreaking scientist, probably way ahead of his time in terms of ideas and thoughts. And he challenged racism, not just in society, but in science itself. As the first African American PhD in physical anthropology, Dr. Cobb used his expertise to debunk the myths of racial inferiority that once passed as being scientific truth. In the 30s, Dr. Cobb analyzed the athletic achievements of Jesse Owens and concluded that his success stemmed from talent and training, not race, as people wanted to say. Through work like this, Dr. Cobb dismantled the core assumptions of race science using data and reason. But he didn't stop there. He fought for medical segregation, mentioned and mentored Black physicians, and reminded the world that more variations exist within racial groups than between them. His legacy is one of science in service of justice. So, artificial intelligence tools, from voice assistant to medical algorithms, are shaping our lives today. And these systems learn from existing science and existing data. And if the record is incomplete or biased, then the results are going to be just that. That's why I believe Dr. Cobb's legacy matters more than ever today. To ensure that AI promotes equity rather than inequality, we must continue his mission of producing research that is representative, rigorous, and widely shared. As Dr. Cobb said, the burden of proof rests on those who assert that any group is innately inferior. In our digital age, the burden of inclusion rests on us. So we hope that you can join us at the symposium for the National Medical Association or the recording that will be placed afterwards. I want to thank the people that are listening and our supreme and eloquent guests this evening for joining in this discussion, knowing that tools like ChatGPT can help the user evaluate the misinformation and the disinformation by comparing those claims that they hear about or they picked up on TikTok or some of the other tools that are very much established, and know that it's not true science. So, again, if you put garbage in, you'll get garbage out. And so we have to very well be aware of the biases that may be there as they generate the tools that we see and use today. And we want to be very keenly aware that we want to be inclusive of all bodies, and that the data that's going in is scientifically generated rather than ideas that have no basis in science. We have a tough job ahead of us for the rest of this year, and hopefully not in the long distance. Um, I want to again ask my guests, it will have final words since I think we have a couple of minutes. Dr. Jameson, would you like to have one concluding thought?
All right. Well, thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to be on the panel with Dr. Sebro and have you hosting us, Dr. Brown. I would say that in conclusion, in my view, that if we embrace AI for the positive benefits that we see coming, in our case, we could all be empowered to have access to certain information that we heretofore didn't have access to through, using our tool, ResearchLink, or others. We also have the Science My Health tool, which puts peer-reviewed medical journal information right in the hands of everyone. So we can now, what we've hoped and dreamed for, empower people to have information in the way they can digest it. And then in the medical field, that extends into being able to get diagnoses quicker, drugs out there faster, targets that we can achieve, and hopefully improve the health of humankind.
Dr. Sebro.
Perfect. So thank you again for having me. I think this was an excellent talk, and thank you, Dr. Brown and Dr. Jameson, for a really nice discussion. AI is a tool, and as any tool, it can be used for good or for harm. And it really depends on who's using the tool and the mindset and the questions of what that person wants to solve. So it's really important that we become immersed in this opportunity. We need to understand what is AI, how to use AI, and be at the table discussions in terms of legislation, in terms of patient privacy, because AI can be used definitively to help reduce disparities and improve patient outcomes, and just really drive healthcare innovation. We are at the cusp of something really, really great right now. We had the agrarian age, which was pretty impressive. We had the industrial revolution, pretty impressive too. But the AI revolution is going to be tremendous, and we need to be very immersed in this opportunity.
Thank you. And keeping with those final comments, I should say that this is a global initiative. It is generated all around the world. And when you look at data centers that are there, of course, most of them are in Europe and some of them are in Asia. Africa also is getting on the bandwagon, and they have a few. And of course, the US. And so we want to make sure that this is a global issue. The Cobb Institute has embraced our partners at the International Medical Exchange, and they are going to be involved in this. Some of the big investors are putting big dollars into AI, and we want to be at the table with our chair, making sure that we are going to have the mosaic input so that people of the world will be able to use this data to improve their health outcomes. And again, we don't want to wait until after it's happened, but we have to be there at the beginning. And that involves the community as well as the providers and the developers, and all of them working as a collaborative team. So thank you this evening. I want to say thank you to our guests. Again, it's been a pleasure working with you, and I look forward to seeing you at the National Medical Association meeting in July. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.